Totally. And a week now after that historic and destructive flooding battered the state of Vermont, they did have heavy rain over the weekend that left some reports of mudslides and landslides. I want to bring in national correspondent Justin Michaels. He's been following the story today in Berlin, Vermont. We've seen some state and national officials come in. Justin, you've also talked about how long it's going to take to get this widespread road damage fixed up.
It's going to take quite a long time, and I will tell you, Alex, to your point about those landslides happening across the state because of that intense amount of rain we got. As you're driving up from Manchester, Vermont, where we've been staying for the last week, you see the landslides on the sides of the highway, and it is something that is pretty remarkable because some of them are quite large. And then, of course, roadways are washed out, people's driveways are washed out. So there is a lot of infrastructure here to be cleaned up, and somebody who knows that quite intimately is Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg, who joins us on the phone right now. Mr. Secretary, we're grateful for your time here because I know you're racing against the clock to get to the airport and back down to Washington, D.C. But, sir, I know you spent plenty of time on the ground here in Hardwick and also Berlin today with Governor Phil Scott. When you were moving around, we've seen the landslides, we've seen just the upheaval of the roadway infrastructure here. Sir, what does it take to bring a state like Vermont back after a storm that really takes up most of the state? It's a huge task.
Well, the impacts are really dramatic, including on infrastructure. We see roads washed out, we see bridges compromised, and railroads as well, which people don't always think about as much in this context, but obviously a lot needs to be done to shore those up, make sure they're safe. So it's going to take them some time to recover. But the good news is there's been a lot of excellent work by first responders, and we're doing everything we can as a Department of Transportation to make sure that they have the resources they need for rebuilding. They describe this as the worst weather they've seen here in probably 70 years or more. The only thing really comparable in recent memory is Hurricane Irene, and that took about a decade to fully finish rebuilding from. We're hoping it won't be that long this time, but clearly a long road ahead here in Vermont.
Mr. Secretary, when it comes to federal disaster declarations, getting the money moving, of course, you coming here is a huge step towards that. Also, just kind of calming people, knowing that the federal government is watching. You were here, you saw it with your own eyes. But when it actually comes down to the dollar and cents, how long does it take to get money moving into the pipeline to truly start repairing these roads, not just the temporary fixes that are there now with gravel and other ways that VDOT is working very hard to get them at least a Band-Aid fix, but actually repaired? How long does it take to get that done?
So what we do is we have a two-level form of support. One is called quick release. The idea there is when they need the dollars quickly to get the ball rolling, get dirt moving, we want to tear down all the barriers, and so there's a process with minimal red tape to get those emergency relief dollars moving. Once that's happening, then they can go on more of a longer-term plan. Then we reimburse the state for the work that the Department of Transportation needs to do. These are less of your kind of emergency patches and more getting into the kind of work that they need to arrange contracts for and take a little more time. And again, that can take a while. In the response to Irene, ultimately, about $180 million went to Vermont from our department. Those first dollars went out in the immediate aftermath, but the last dollars, even though this storm happened about a decade ago, the most recent funding moved in 2021. So the idea is we're there right away for what needs immediate attention, but we're also going to be there for the long haul.
Mr. Secretary, another question for you. As far as building back better, building these roads so they can handle more moisture and more weather like they just went through, as climate change is happening and as things are changing, and maybe the roadways that were built here over the decades, maybe they're not sustainable anymore. So how does the Department of Transportation and your highway administrator and all the people who are looking at the science behind this, how do you work to maybe building new roads, looking at maybe the technology they use in Florida or down south, the roads that have withstood hurricanes or tornadoes out west, or whatever the weather might be? Is that something being looked at by the Department of Transportation to implement even in northern states that may have never needed it before?
It is. You know, what used to be considered a 100-year flood or a 1,000-year flood, it's just not anymore. And so it doesn't make any sense to put back roads the exact way they used to be every time. We got to make sure we're building for a future that is going to be different from the past. We're doing everything we can to fight that from getting worse in the first place. We also just need to face reality, and we need to build accordingly. That's why part of the president's infrastructure package is a program called Protect. We're putting billions of dollars as a federal government into more resilient construction to help with everything from drought and drought-related landslide and wildfire resistance to dealing with floods. And sometimes those things happen in short order. I saw what happened to I-70 in Colorado. First wildfires, then floods leading to mudslides, taking out I-70, which was a very important route, not just as an evacuation route, but also for supply chains. So we need to be building for a future that is going to be different. It's going to have more frequent and extreme weather, and we need to do that not just in terms of the materials, technologies, and techniques that we use, but also in terms of where we build. And frankly, the right place to build a road might be different in the 2020s than it was in the 1920s.
Mr. Secretary, one final question for you. As far as getting back to Washington and going back down, undoubtedly at least be in a cabinet meeting or even have a one-on-one with the president in the not-so-distant future, what is the messaging you give to the president after having spent time here, talked to people on the ground here, talked to the governor, bipartisan efforts all around trying to get this state moving again and get the roadways open again? What do you take back to the president as you talk to him next?
Well, the biggest thing I want him to know is the level of cooperation that's going on here. As you mentioned, it's very bipartisan. Politics does not come up when we're on the ground dealing with a situation like this. He has instructed us to take an all-of-government approach. FEMA has been leading so much good work here. We're involved, too, as a department. But you look at what everybody from activated guard units are doing to the work of the local responders, and you can see how everybody's teaming up. So I want him to know about that teamwork, and he'll be wanting to know about what else we can do to support the people here in Vermont.
U.S. Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg, we are grateful for your time. I know you're racing to the airport. I hope you make your flight, sir.
Thanks very much. Thanks for speaking with us, and thanks for drawing attention to the situation here. They're going to come back okay, but it could be a long road.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate your time. Safe flight. So that again, Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg talking to us here on the Weather Channel just after he actually had a media conference here with the governor, other state officials to update folks on the current situation, what it's going to take to bring Vermont back. There is still so much work that needs to be done. Roadway infrastructure from north to south, east and west is very badly damaged. And in some cases, roads were shut down, Alex. They're working to bring those back. And I will tell you, Alex, as you're driving around, because remember, Vermont is a very rural state. There is no massive metropolis like you're going to find in some other states, like a New York or a Washington, D.C. So here, very small communities are trying to make their way through by truly using stopgaps, filling the gap with gravel, filling the gap with rock, working with VDOT, where we're standing right now, to try to fix things temporarily before much larger fixes go in. But it's amazing, Alex, as you move around, how rural this state is and how wide-reaching the problems are. So you heard the secretary there say, in the aftermath of Irene 11 years ago, it took more than a decade to bring the state back. So, Alex, like we always say, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Nothing about disaster recovery is easy or fast, and Vermont is learning that lesson yet again. Alex,
yeah, and they've got the challenges of those more isolated communities, those more rural roadways, so extra problems. Justin, thank you so much and for that great conversation. We appreciate it. Other areas across the country that could see some flash flooding issues today, they'd be more